Hello, everybody, and welcome to Science Streams. We are here today to talk about macromolecules. Now, the same as the other videos in this series, this is for anywhere from high school biology all the way through AP. I go through some very basics, try to compress it all down to something that's manageable. So instead of the hour-long lecture, you get it a little bit briefer. But there will also be some supplemental videos with a lot more detail because there is a lot more. Hopefully you find this useful. This is being broadcast on Twitch first, so hopefully you're here. Please support the channel so you can like and subscribe, of course, on YouTube, but also give a follow or even just lurk on Twitch. It is appreciated. And today, macromolecules, we talked about functional groups in our last video. In this video, we're going to learn about these macromolecules where we're going to see those functional groups being used, right? The application of having to know them. And there are four main macromolecules. We got carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. We're going to go through each of these fairly quickly. You can always pause, take notes, whatever. I do have a summary chart at the end of the video that you are not going to want to miss. All right, this is something I made up, and it is a fabulous study tool for anyone doing biology on those four macromolecules to really kind of give you something simple to look at to help you study. So the first one we're going to look at today are carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates are just why they sound, carbon and hydrogen, but they also have oxygen. Okay, and the simplest carbohydrates are called monosaccharides, and these monosaccharides come together to then form disaccharides. You can see that in this picture here. This is two glucoses coming in to then form a maltose. And that's done through a process called dehydration synthesis. And all you have to know right now about dehydration synthesis is that you're going to lose a water in the process. You can see that the two hydrogen and oxygens that are red in this diagram are going to be going elsewhere. All right, they're going to be going someplace else. All right. Away. So they're going to be removed, and those two molecules of glucose will be joined together. So that is the dehydration synthesis. We'll see that other places, very common in biology. When we break it back down again, it's called hydrolysis. Lyse meaning break up, and water is put in to make that happen. Some examples of monosaccharides: glucose, fructose, galactose. This is not an exhaustive list. There are more, but these are the ones you should definitely be familiar with. Disaccharides, sucrose, lactose, and maltose. Believe it or not, your table sugar. I got some right here. Your general table sugar. This is my little sugar jar here, right? This is actually a disaccharide. You might think, oh, it's just a sugar molecule. It is disaccharide. Okay, so that's sucrose. Right, that's what you're going to get put into your coffee or when you're cooking. We also have polysaccharides. We can not just link two together, but huge strings of millions of these together. And these monosaccharides like glucose together to form things like starch, glycogen, which are for storage, right, of that for energy purposes in the cell, but also cellulose and chitin, which are used by organisms for structure. Chitin's a little bit special in that it does contain nitrogen, which is not common at all for carbohydrates. Now, something else we need to know about carbohydrates is generally they are such that they will dissolve, right? They are polar, and so this is why your sugar will dissolve in the coffee when you put it in there. Okay, so that is also something we need to keep in mind. Lipids. Lipids, on the other hand, instead of being hydrophilic, okay, like carbohydrates are hydrophobic. Now, this is huge because this gives them the properties that we associate with fats, okay, and other lipids. So a fat is actually a large lipid made up of a glycerol and a fatty acid. We can see a triglyceride here, and these will come together and make, fats. Also very important for this, the cellular membrane, and all membranes within the cell are made of the phospholipids. And so this is a different kind of special kind of lipid that'll actually contain phosphorus as well. But generally speaking, lipids are not going to have phosphorus. So this is going to be tricky sometimes when you get a question on a test or a quiz talking about lipids and the primary elements that they're made of. Okay, so generally they're just made up of the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, like we can see in the picture here. But occasionally, if you're talking about a phospholipid, of course, it'll have that phosphate group. All right, remember, we talked about those functional groups. Other examples of these lipids are steroids and cholesterol. Now, we can see that these are hydrophobic, right? When we look at our classic oil and water, right? So we have our water here, and right, and I already said previously, because that carbohydrate, right? That carbohydrate will have the ability to, lose that oxygen on the hydroxyl group and become acidic, and so become polar, and therefore be able to dissolve, right? So, if we take a little bit of sugar here, place it in there, insert it up, and this is just food coloring in here, make it visually appealing, right? That will dissolve, right? So we can have a little dissolving going on there. Now, of course, when we put that hydrophobic fat molecules in there, it's got some oil here. Okay. Right, we can see that molecule just kind of floating on there, right? That blob, right? Because that oil is not going to want to mix at all. So we know that that's hydrophobic. Little tests that we can do, and there's other tests we can do as well that determine what things are, and we'll talk about that more in the future in some other videos. So lipids. Let's move on to proteins. Proteins have monomers as well. Notice that the lipids did not have a monomer, right? They don't form a polymer at all. Okay, they can to some extent, but generally they're not seen as being like having monomers and polymers. Proteins are, and those monomers that they have are amino acids, and the amino acids can bond together through, guess what? Dehydration synthesis. We can see that this picture here again. We lose that water molecule. The two hydrogen oxygen are removed from this hydroxyl group and this hydrogen here of this amino group, and boom, we get a peptide bond. And proteins can also be known as a polypeptide. The protein is just a more larger functional group of that polypeptide. And one of the most important things about proteins is that enzymes are proteins. enzymes are proteins. And this is a simple fact. If you remember this, this will help you so much, so you don't get confused. And this allows all the chemical, not all, but the majority of the chemical reactions in organisms to happen. These allow these chemical reactions to take place at our body temperature, or the temperature of the organism that it's in. And the shape of that protein, whatever it is, determines its function. Same with enzymes. The shape of that enzyme determines what the function is. Form equals the function. And we'll get more of these specific types of proteins throughout biology. But for right now, this is the basics, and I don't want to get into too much more about these proteins, but just know that they are formed by amino acids. Those are the monomers. They come together to make a polymer called a polypeptide through dehydration synthesis, and the enzymes that help chemical reactions in the bodies. All right. These are enzymes that are proteins. The last macromolecule we're going to talk about, nucleic acids. And nucleic acids contain both nitrogen and phosphorus. They contain both nitrogen and phosphorus. It's a genetic material, that DNA and the RNA. The monomers are called the nucleotides. So this macromolecule also has a monomer that joins together to form a polymer. The polymer itself, the larger molecule, is the nucleic acid. A nucleotide is that individual monomer. Do not get those two mixed up. So keep them straight in your head. The nucleotide is that one thing that has the base pair, whereas the entire thing of DNA or RNA, that's the nucleic acid. Okay, so we look at this, we do have the phosphorus here, this phosphate group, or those functional groups talked about. We have nitrogen in here as well for each of these. Don't worry about a lot of this other structure yet. It's very more complicated than we want to get into right now. We want to keep this simple, so we can just do one piece at a time. Right now, just know that these are nucleotides. They come together to make the nucleic acid, and it contains the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. So I said at the beginning that I had a very nice summary of everything. Here it is. I'd suggest that you pause the video now so you can write this down, because this is an excellent study guide, because you can already imagine, and as teachers and people that write questions like myself, we see that there are 4 things, and usually in a multiple choice test, guess how many choices you have? 4. So a lot of questions for this unit early on in your biology class will probably be around these and differentiating each one of these. Okay, differentiating each one of these. So you might have a question such as, which macromolecule always contains phosphate? Right, phosphorus, right, or a phosphate functional group. You would say nucleic acids, right? They're always going to have it. We test a substance, and it has a high level of nitrogen. Which might it be, right? You say, oh, proteins, probably, right? We test an unknown substance and find that the macromolecule is hydrophobic, right? You know what it is, right? It's going to be a lipid. So these are the types of questions that we need to kind of understand. I have some other words here that you need to be familiar with. So like I said, go ahead, pause this video, write this down. In the next videos, we're going to go into some additional detail on these 4 as we go through units. And you can always look up additional details as well, but this is some of the basics of biology right here. Thanks for watching. Tune into the next video, watch previous videos if you have not. I hope to see you again soon. Later.